Hey everybody, welcome back to Workshop Quick Takes. Thanks for joining me on my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to do a fairly quick and easy one, or at least it would be fairly quick and easy if I were to just relocate my vacuum bottle. This here is a Reservoir bottle that you may recognize if you've ever pulled the front right cover off of your bumper. It's kind of tucked back in there, hiding behind the bumper. It then has some lines that connect it and snake up back along here. Capture the cruise control actuator if you have that, because that is vacuum actuated. Circle around, pick up the HVAC vacuum electric controls right there, and then continue on around to the manifold. Now I still have the OE bumper, but I don't have cruise control. This one didn't come with it, and I'm not going to put it in because I've since filled that space with an auxiliary fuse and relay box for my lighting. Right now, without the vacuum ball, what I have noticed routinely is it'll flip between upper vents and defrost and lower vents, and sometimes the heat will also cut in and out. I'm not sure why on that one, because the hot-cold flap is supposed to be controlled electrically from what I can tell. So I got to thinking, maybe I could just move this. Well, this giant sphere is kind of an awkward shape. There's really no good place to fit it down in here, not even right back here, although I suppose you could just kind of leave it on top there, but that's kind of hackish. So instead, I've used ABS plastic to build this auxiliary bottle that I can tuck right back down here behind the air conditioning dryer. But before we do that, let's show the process of how we got here, starting with taking measurements and then going inside and fabricating this thing from parts we picked up at a local home improvement store. The challenge for locating anything back here is that there is a lot of empty space, but only between a gaggle of HVAC lines. That won't be an issue for anyone who has performed an AC delete, and in that case we could just put rivet insert nuts into the firewall, reinstall the OE vacuum reservoir there, and be done with it. But since we do use both summer cooling and winter defrost settings in this vehicle, the AC system is a useful thing to keep around. Temporarily pulling the coolant overflow bottle might have given us enough clearance to tuck the OE reservoir down on the inner fender skirt's wheel arch, but then we're drilling into a rust-prone area. And why fuss with that when you've got a perfectly good excuse to fabricate something new using ordinary plumbing supplies? At least, that's what we told ourselves. Our measurements suggested a 2-inch diameter pipe was the reasonable limit. Next, there's the question of what materials to use. 2-inch pipe is a standard plumbing size in both PVC and ABS plastic. Some sources suggest that PVC has a higher melting point, but that won't be an issue under here unless the vehicle is already on fire, in which case vacuum leaks are both likely and low on the list of immediate concerns. So we're thinking ABS pipe will be suitable as it's more impact resistant. Also, it's what commonly gets used for underhood plastic components, such as our Jeep's airbox. We can assume the OEMs must know something about its properties that we don't. Anyway, we need only a short length, and 24-inch pre-cut sections are available, so we'll grab one of those at our local home improvement store, along with a pair of end caps, ABS pipe cement, and a brass hose barb fitting with the smallest practical barb flange. Here's the parts and pieces we got for our DIY tank. If you think inflation isn't real, this here was $8.91. That's not too surprising, but these also $9 each. Plus this for $6 or $7, and this for another $5. These 5 items were a $40 purchase with tax. Right before the pandemic, would have been about $25. But what can you do? Anyway, next thing we need to do is get this outside and double check with, before we actually seal anything up, just put the cap on it and make sure that the area we were looking for clearance in is an area where we can install a pipe and how long it can be. We confirmed our new reservoir would attach to the side of the AC dryer canister with a maximum height of 8 to 12 inches. To see if that made sense, we needed to do the math. Okay, we want to solve for the volume of a sphere, which we'll represent by a bowling ball. Which sphere? This sphere. The diameter appears to be just over 4.5 inches. We'll just use that as a starting point. So, volume of a sphere equals, remember our basic equations here, 4/3 times pi times the radius cubed. In this case, radius is 1/2 of the diameter. (47.7 inches cubed. That's the approximate volume inside the vacuum ball that came out of the Jeep. Volume of a cylinder. What cylinder? Well, this cylinder that we're going to build here. It has a 2-inch inner diameter. Remember, the volume of a cylinder is the area of the circular face times the height. In this case, the diameter is 2, half of that is the radius, is 1. Well, 1 squared has a curious property that we like very much. It is 1. So this just equals pi h for this particular radius. Now, we know what pi is, we don't know what h we need. What h would we need if we wanted the exact same volume as the sphere that we've removed? Surprisingly, it's quite a bit. We take this equation and rearrange it algebraically so that we have a total volume of 47.7 equals pi h, or rearrange, gives us a length of 15.2 inches roughly. Okay, but we just told ourselves we could only get maybe 12 in there. How much difference is that going to make? 37.7 inches cubed for the interior volume of the cylinder that we are about to create. 79%, so roughly 80% of the volume that we were going to get. Keep in mind, however, we are only trying to keep enough vacuum reservoir to operate the HVAC controls correctly. That's a pretty low load. The original volume of that sphere was mostly intended to keep the cruise controls operating correctly. And the cruise control is kind of critical because at the exact moment that you go to wide open throttle, in other words, you pull a lot of vacuum out of the cruise control mechanism, you're also losing engine vacuum because your throttle's now wide open. So I'm betting that if we go 12 inches, maybe even 8 or a little smaller, possibly even as small as say 6, it's probably going to be fine. Well, it isn't strictly necessary, but just to make sure I get nice even cuts, I'll use the chop saw here. In case it isn't obvious, all that melty stuff there is pretty hot when it first comes off the saw, so give it a minute before doing that. And again, we're going with 8 inches. Another quick test fit was done, and we then marked a good spot for the hose barb. Okay, let's figure out what diameter hole we need to drill for this. I'm pretty sure I don't have a tap that can thread this large, so I'm just going to try and make the hole a little smaller and then just self-tap it into the pipe here. Okay, with threads, the outer diameter is here over a 1/2 inch. So I think I have a 1/2 inch on here. Just to make sure we don't have any residual hanging out in there. Which we're going to do, it looks like. Tapping in more or less perpendicular, more or less. First of all, I'm gonna take this back out because I'm gonna put it back. When I put it back in, even though I think it's making a pretty good seal now, I'm gonna go ahead and install it with just a little bit of Permatex black adhesive to make sure the threads lock in there. But I don't want to have any little pieces of anything that might get sucked back in vacuum of the manifold intake. So all 3 of these pieces now need to be very thoroughly washed before proceeding. Okay, should all be dry enough now. Make sure both surfaces are good and doped. Okay, and just because I want to look as neat as possible, I'll wipe off the excess. Alright, that's side A. Now for side B. Once that cures, those are never coming apart again except by a saw, fire, or other capable force of nature. Now for this one, I'm going to just lightly dope the threads with a little bit of Permatex black and hope that makes a nice permanent seal going in there. I could probably use the pipe cement and I'll bet it'd work just about as well. Let that finish curing up nicely before trying to put it in the Jeep, but we now have our substitute vacuum canister. Okay, it's pretty close to dry, a couple more odds and ends. I'm going to wrap this around the AC dryer with these stainless steel ties. Zip ties. Now, in theory, these go in and then they're done. But I have seen these pop loose and pull back out again, so what I'm doing is a loop back. Yeah, that idea didn't work. Let's skip ahead to what did. The other thing is on the side here where it's going to be pressing up against the condenser, I'm just going to take a strip of self-adhesive weather stripping. It's going to be pinched in there so it doesn't have to stick super well, not coming back out once I mount it. And then where this is going to be mounting, which is about like that, I think. If I have to, I can move it later. And I'll just have that there attached to padding so it doesn't slip around. Okay, my original plan was the stainless steel zip ties, but that kind of flamed out. So I came up with this prototype here, and it works. It's a pipe clamp, except that it's been extended using polypropylene gas line strap, but it's a little bit too long. I need to make another one, so let's just walk through the process of how that works real quick. First up, I'm starting with a 1 3/8 to 2 inch rated, diameter rated hose clamp. Then I just need to more or less straighten it out. Next up, I need to cut it, and I want to leave a small piece of it down there that doesn't pass the slots so I can get a good solid rivet hole through there. And now we cut. This is stainless steel, so it's a little bit harder than regular mild steel or aluminum, and it's going to buck the saw a little bit, so I want to keep this hand up out of the way. Fortunately, I can do the little corner trim with just a large side cutters here. Okay, next up, I need to measure this. And what I originally did was just take a piece of string out there, wrap it, and get an idea where it came out. Then I went a little bit shorter because I knew I had some extra breadth to span that would be spanned by this piece here. It was still a bit too much. So I'm going to start with this one instead and shorten it by 1, maybe 2 holes because I want to have some extra play in it because I have a feeling this is going to stretch out a little bit over time and I'll need to tighten it once or twice before it fully settles in. But first off, just to make sure I've got myself 2 good holes to run rivets through, I'm going to fold that right there, and that's going to be one end. So let's go here. Fold it there, and that means I'm cutting just on the other side of this. Okay, so these are the 4 pieces I'm starting with. Next up, I'm going to need to mark holes on here that more or less line up with these holes here. If I have to, I can obviously re-drill the plastic very easily, but I'd like to get everything to line up from the get-go. Let's try right there. Now I'm going to hit them with a center punch. Doesn't take much. Remember, this is the end that feeds through here. So this is the end I'm working on. So right there. Next step here I have this assortment of rivets. These are just aluminum rivets from Harbor Freight, but they'll do the trick. I did, however, step up a little bit and get their mid-range rivet gun here because this job is aggravating enough without having a tool that's slipping. But then the other thing, which I did on this one, is I need some kind of washer, and all I have is these split washers, but they're stainless steel split washers. I think they'll do the trick. They're much stronger than the aluminum rivet, so I don't think they'll spread out too easily. I'm going to start by putting a rivet through the hole. There we go. Nice and tight. And then likewise through the plastic here. And then I'm just going to slip that on there and hold it until the rivet starts to collapse. There we go. Now for the final step here, I'm going to take my small hammer. I'm going to flatten that out. Like a glove. Well, there we are. My preliminary test outside said that this was just enough to wrap all the way around the canister and tighten up. We'll get this out to the vehicle next and install it. As indicated earlier, these stainless steel zip ties were our first attempt to secure the vacuum reservoir to the AC dryer cartridge. But they just wouldn't secure tightly. So we scrapped that idea and several mangled ties and went with our modified hose clamp method instead. That one worked. Okay, it is crisp out here this AM. Originally, we had just deleted the vacuum reservoir, and this T-section had been removed and the vacuum line to the cabin had been spliced directly to the incoming hard line from the manifold. But as always, save your OE parts after making modifications. Here we are, putting it back in service after months in the storage bin. The one change is that the T-section originally had another plastic hardline that continued down to the cruise control module. We want to splice it to a short hose section that connects to the new reservoir. So we've added a plastic inline coupler from one of those 10-piece universal vacuum line repair kits that can be purchased at any auto parts store. Okay, that wasn't too terrible once I got the clamp here figured out. I might still need to make a second one, we'll find out eventually. But in any case, it can be removed if necessary. Helpful hand if you need more access to that. This here actually does just lift off, and I wasn't paying attention to that a minute ago. So now you can better see that valve. And I can also verify that it's not really going to rub on anything. Ooh, there's a problem. Always one more thing. I'll show you. Good reason to double check your job. I trapped the rear washer fluid line under there, so I'm not going to have any rear washer fluid if I leave it like that. Glad I noticed that before I got tooling down the highway in a snowstorm and wondered why I couldn't see out the rear window. Alright, last step to wrap this up. I need to start the vehicle and just make sure I don't hear any hissing of vacuum leaks or see an irregular operation from the HVAC controls. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, we're on the mid-level ones, and I'm feeling air out of the mid-level ones. Switch it to lower. That dropped out, getting air down here. And finally defrost, so yeah, I'm getting air from the defrost. So it looks like it's working, tentatively. Have to get it on the highway and find out for sure. Okay, so there we go. Hopefully that wraps that project up, and that's one more thing off the checklist. That's a little bit unconventional, going all that trouble to build the extra reservoir that fits where I wanted it to fit. Yeah, we probably could have used the original vacuum ball when we pulled out of the bumper and just shoved it somewhere, but I think this will be a little bit neater and hopefully a little bit more durable as a result. So hopefully that gives you some inspiration, and now there's a project waiting for you in your vehicle. Go do it. We'll see you again next time, whenever that is. Has anyone seen my phone?